The trade deadline may be 6 weeks away still, but I'm still ramping up the trade content. These are recent end-of-July trades for players on expiring contracts where the team gave up a prospect of pretty big value and didn't get that value in return, or simply didn't get the result they wanted at the end of the season. Let's not waste any time and get into our first entry. We'll go back to the 2021 trade deadline for this swap, a very eventful season of trading where both the Cubs and the Nationals cores were dissolved in blockbuster trades. At the end of July that season, the Oakland A's held that second wildcard spot and were only 5.5 games back of the division-leading Astros. Sensing that another one of their roster deconstructions was right around the corner in the upcoming offseason, the front office worked to power up the roster to make a potential World Series push. The team acquired their X-factor in outfielder Starling Marte. Just a year prior, Marte was sent from Arizona to Miami in the pandemic season as the Marlins rode his hot production to an improbable wildcard berth and postseason series victory. But a year later, the team had regressed back down to their expectations in a full season, reeling from injuries to Jazz Chisholm and Pablo Lopez in addition to the underperformance of many of their position players. Nearly 20 games under 500 with a couple of months left to go in the season, the team cut bait on many of their veterans, most notably Starling Marte, who managed a 119 OPS plus in 92 games as a Marlin in parts of 2 seasons. Now, I want to preface this discussion by saying that Starling Marte was unreal for the Oakland A's, and many of their diehard fans remember this 2-month stint with the team very fondly. In his 56 games in the gold and green, Marte hit well over 300 with a 130 OPS plus and stole an absurd 25 bases in this window as well. In the final 2 months of the season, he ranked in the top 10 of All-American League players for F4, batting average, and he stole 8 more bases than any other player in his league in this time frame as well. He racked up nearly 2 wins above replacement in just 2 months with the club and nearly powered the entire offense to a playoff berth. Keyword there is nearly. The sad fact of this trade is that the Oakland A's fell short of the playoffs despite an 86-win season behind 3 other teams in the wildcard race when the season wrapped up. The deal was supposed to supplement the roster with premier talent, but soon after the trade, starting pitcher Chris Bassitt was struck by a line drive, a spot that could have been assumed by the guy that they traded. We'll get to that in a second. Ramon Laureano was also tagged with a steroid suspension, meaning that instead of pairing him with Starling Marte, the new acquisition was now filling a void. It's just some tough luck for the Oakland A's, you know, a team that traditionally has really good luck. In the offseason, both Starling Marte and their other outfielder, Mark Canha, signed lucrative deals with the New York Mets, and Oakland moved forward with the dissolution of their core, trading away Matt Olson, Matt Chapman, and Chris Bassitt, among others. They had to do something at that deadline, but they paid a hefty price in their deal for Marte, trading away starting pitching prospect Jesus Luzardo, who ranked number 1 overall in their system in 2020 and number 12 in all of baseball according to MLB. Luzardo hadn't pitched particularly well in his brief tenure with the big league club from 2019 to 2021, and he did struggle upon his arrival in Miami. But at only 23 years old, with 6 years left of control on his contract, the Marlins began to reap the rewards of their deadline swap soon after. From 2022 to 2023, Luzardo made 50 starts with a 1.27 ERA+. In this 2-year window, his 3.48 ERA was in the top 15 of all National League starting pitchers with at least 250 innings. In 2023, during their march to an unlikely wildcard berth, Luzardo had a terrific season as the ace of the staff, ranking 8th in the National League for Fangraphs wins above replacement. In the present season, Luzardo looks like he's going to be dealt once again at this year's deadline. Still, in his time with Miami, he's been worth over 6 wins above replacement, tripling the number that Marte provided to the Oakland A's in his short time there. Again, you can't fault the Oakland A's for wanting to compete, and the move electrified a fan base that deserved to watch a great team. It was a good win-now trade for a team that didn't win now. Miami came out the other side victorious in this deal, and it's hard to imagine them making the playoffs last year had they not committed to selling back in 2021. For this next entry, I want to first talk about All-Star voting, which may not seem relevant to the topic at all. But right now, one of the fiercest All-Star voting pushes is being conducted by one of the most passionate fan bases in baseball, who is also undergoing one of the most torturous seasons in recent memory. White Sox fans are doing everything in their power to get their starting catcher, Martin Maldonado, to the All-Star game. For reference, you, the person sitting at home watching this video, maybe eating lunch or on the toilet, has more wins above replacement and a better OPS plus than Maldonado, and it's not particularly close. He's had a bizarre career. He was the defensive linchpin to several successful Houston Astros teams, but he's routinely one of the worst hitters in baseball. But 6 years ago, the Astros worked to acquire him at the trade deadline. The 103-win team from 2018 was dealing with the declining offensive production from their catching tandem of Brian McCann and Max Stassi and decided to lean towards a defensive proficient replacement. Maldonado provided that service and even managed a playoff home run in his 2-month stint as a rental player for the team. In the offseason after Houston lost the American League Championship Series, Martin Maldonado inked a 1-year deal worth $2.5 million with the Kansas City Royals, and then he got traded 2 more times that year anyway and wound up back with the Astros. After 2019, the team kept him around and he ended up staying with Houston all the way until 2023. Many Astros teammates referred to him as one of the most important members of the clubhouse, which is still important outside of on-the-field play. It's just that the on-the-field play got really bad at sometimes. Despite playing parts of 6 straight seasons with the club, he was only worth about 2.1 wins above replacement cumulatively when all was said and done. But this isn't about his career with Houston, it's about the rental deal, which only accounts for the 2 months that he was there. In the original deadline deal to acquire his services, the Astros sent away an unranked pitching prospect and some international bonus pool money. Little did they know, their former 11th round pick from the 2015 draft, left-hander Patrick Sandoval, would become a quality big league starter in just a few years' time. The Angels promoted him to the big leagues the year after acquiring him, and by 2021, he was a valuable cog in their starting rotation. Sandoval has been worth over 6 wins above replacement as an Angels pitcher, with most of that coming in his effective stretch from 2021 to 2022. In this 2-year window, his 3.17 ERA in over 200 innings was a top 15 mark among American League pitchers. His 2022 season, where he managed a 2.91 ERA in 27 starts, is one of only 6 qualified seasons by Angels starting pitchers with a sub-3 ERA since the year 2000. You can spin this as a really impressive season for Patrick Sandoval or just a really sad state of affairs on Angels pitching in the past 25 years. I'll let you be the judge. He also made a star out of himself in the 2023 World Baseball Classic, striking out 6 batters over 4 1/3 shutout innings in Team Mexico's elimination game against Team Japan. Despite the ebbs and flows of productivity in his career, the fact remains that the Angels won out big time by finding a reliable starting pitcher in a quiet deadline deal for a rental catcher from 7 years ago. The team would have been a whole lot worse without him these past few years had they not gotten this deal done. Let's stay at the 2018 trade deadline for our next entry. The Milwaukee Brewers have become a model organization of consistency the past several years. After David Stearns took over lead operations for the franchise, the club made the playoffs in 5 of 6 seasons from 2018 to 2023 and look like they're well on their way back there this year, even with new leadership at the helm. But I don't think it's controversial to suggest that their most impressive playoff caliber roster was their first in their new era of baseball. The 2018 team came 1 victory shy of a National League pennant, which would have been only the second in franchise history to that point. The team also still had their name brand stars in the outfield. That year's MVP winner Christian Yelich, a former MVP winner in Ryan Braun, and a former World Series champion in Lorenzo Cain. The front office rightfully looked to push the envelope at that year's deadline to make a run at the Fall Classic. The Brewers were 63-47, knotted in a tie for first place in the NL Central with the Chicago Cubs on deadline day. Their rival worked to acquire Jesse Chavez and Daniel Murphy to bolster their roster, so Milwaukee had to respond. They did so by adding Mike Moustakas, who was honestly a great Brewer in his time there. But they weren't done there, as they looked to make another move to improve their production at second base. They found a suitor in the Baltimore Orioles, to whom they sent their number 5 overall prospect, pitcher Luis Ortiz, who ranked number 67 in all of baseball prior to 2016 in Baseball America's rankings. Also included was their number 16 prospect, shortstop Gene Carmona. In doing so, they acquired veteran second baseman Jonathan Scope, who finished 12th in the American League MVP voting the year prior with an All-Star nod, 32 home runs, and a 124 OPS+. Like many Baltimore players in 2018, he was playing below league average as the club pressed full steam ahead on a rebuild. Sadly for Baltimore, neither of the prospects they acquired panned out to much of anything, as the club endured many more losing campaigns. The funny thing is, the placeholder player they received as the final piece of the package, and the player the Brewers were trying to replace, turned out to be the best find of all. In the bad years of Baltimore baseball, Jonathan Villar was one of the only bright spots on some very mediocre rosters. After a strong finish to the 2018 season once he changed uniforms, Villar played all 162 games in the 2019 season, hitting 24 home runs with 40 stolen bases and an OPS just under 800. For reference, there are only 4 players in the last 5 years to hit over 20 home runs with 40 or more stolen bases in a single season. 3 of them did it last year with the bigger bases implemented, and I'm sure more are going to do it this year. But the only other player besides those 3 from last year is Jonathan Villar in 2019. Who knows if he would have produced produced like that had Milwaukee held on to him, but they certainly could have used the near 6 wins above replacement VR provided the Orioles in that year-and-a-half window. Because on the other side, the Jonathan Schoop experiment was an utter disaster. In 46 games down the stretch, Schoop put up easily the worst offensive numbers of his career, worse than what was provided before with VR. Of players with at least 130 plate appearances in the final 2 months of 2018, Schoop registered a bottom 10 weighted runs created plus in all of baseball. In the offseason, the Brewers decided to save $10 million by not tendering Jonathan Schoop a contract, and no one blamed them. This ended his Milwaukee tenure with exactly 0 wins above replacement, making this a huge win for the Orioles. Not that it mattered, because the Orioles were going to go on to lose a ton of games. Our final entry will also be our most recent, and wouldn't you know, it's the Houston Astros trading for another defense-first catcher. I mean, when will these guys learn? You know, actually, now that I think about it, they won a lot of games despite making these moves, so maybe I should just shut up. For parts of 9 years, Christian Vasquez was a beloved Boston backstop, guiding some successful Red Sox pitching staffs while also hidden a little bit in his time at Fenway. In 2019 specifically, the catcher clubbed a career-best 23 home runs with an OPS near 800, both far and away his career highs in a full season. Okay, look, we all know why he had his career highs in 2019. Everybody knows, but can't we just appreciate the numbers? In 2022, however, Vasquez's tenure with the club was winding down as he was set to hit free agency in the impending offseason. Heading towards the deadline, firmly in last place in an unbelievably competitive AL East division. The only players that were dealt by them were lefty reliever Jake Diekman and their longtime catcher Christian Vasquez, to the very team that conquered them in the ALCS a year prior, the Houston Astros. Vasquez was admittedly hitting well at the time, but it was a bit naive to assume he'd maintain that production considering his career offensive output to that point was not exactly impressive. Plus, Houston already had Martin Maldonado, you know that from our previous trade. In the 35 games he played for Houston, Vasquez's numbers returned back down to earth, and on their run to a World Series victory, Vasquez played in 6 of their games. Similar to last video, it's hard for Houston fans to really be upset about this trade or any of the other ones, considering that the team accomplished the ultimate goal of winning a championship again. But this one leaves a specific sting when you weigh in the state of the current team in 2024. Who knows where the Houston Astros might be in a month's time? Hell, they could be winning the AL West for all I know, but right now, they could certainly use more talent on their roster. In the swap to acquire the last 2 months of Christian Vasquez's contract where he produced negative wins above replacement for the team, the Astros sent away 2 position player prospects who ranked outside of their top 30 but have both reached the big leagues and produced for the Red Sox. One is infielder Emmanuel Valdez, who has yet to find his footing in nearly 100 games for Boston at second base, but has a chance to produce with more playing time available. The second is where the trade really starts to hurt Houston, as they also sent away outfielder Wheelier Abreu. In a half season's worth of games over the past 2 years, Abreu has smacked the cover off the ball for Boston. He's managed an OPS well over 800 and displays very promising metrics on both sides of the ball as a 24-year-old. Right now, the damage is only about 2.5 wins above replacement to Abreu's young career, but with both him and Valdez under control for most of the 2020s, this has a chance to be one of the most poorly aged rental trades of the entire decade. The price to pay for Vasquez's services may prove incredibly costly. And that was my list. If I missed another one, leave a comment down below, but after 2 installments in this series, I think we're ready to move on to a new trade topic. If you have one in mind, let me know. That'll do it for me though, and I'll see you guys next time.